Where? Oh. Oh, really? Yeah, safe band.
Reach for them, they have staff railroad. She figured it out. I told you it was going to go around the corner. You did this with me.
Wait, I don't know if I can. David, no, don't do this, okay? It was her.
Are they? Yeah. Oh, good. That's awesome.
Documenting this? Now you got a chip. Come on, both.
I think that's right.
Hi.
Oh, yeah.
As far to the front as you can go. As far to the front as you can go.
Just a few minutes. My name is Vince Swiderly. I'm the principal here at North Bend Middle School. I'm not the one running. On behalf of the North Bend School District and the community of North Bend, I'd like to welcome you all here to North Bend Middle School. I'd like to introduce our jazz band, the North Bend High School Jazz Band. Let's give them a big hand. They are truly wonderful. The director is Amber Marissa. You know, this really is an historic event. Who come here that have been in our town campaign, have been on the campaign trail, no current or to see and hear and meet President Bill Clinton. It is exciting that Oregon is relevant on the national picture for the first time in a long, long time. I'm a social studies teacher at heart, and I've been waiting for this day for a long time. 6 months ago, 8 months ago, I could... the principal, Vince Swaggerty, the superintendent who welcomed me, and the band for playing, and all the people at the school who made it possible for us to have this meeting here tonight. I want to thank County Commissioner Nikki Whitty for being here, Senator Joanne Berger, and Molly McCarthy-Skundrich, and I'd like to thank the entire family of your Secretary of State, Bill Bradley, all the people here who came to meet me, and the others who are here who greeted me outside. I am honored to be here. I understand that I'm the first representative of a presidential campaign since Robert Kennedy was here. That seems like a good place to start because first, for the young people here, I know these are tough times for you, but let me remind you, 40 years ago when Robert Kennedy was here, this country was going through tough times. Who introduced me by saying that Hillary holds the same seat in the United States Senate his father did, and is his worthy successor in this campaign for president because she's in it for the only legitimate reason anyone should ever run for president, to empower the American people. I am profoundly grateful that he and his two most politically active sisters, Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, the former Lieutenant Governor of Maryland, and Kerry Kennedy, who's an international human rights activist, are both helping Hillary. And I'm also very grateful for the support of your governor, who has been a very good supporter and advisor. This campaign is fascinating, isn't it? Aren't you glad Oregon's votes count? Don't you think every vote should be counted? Both these candidates are truly historic, and in fairness, Senator McCain in his own way is a historic candidate. Now, let me finish. Hillary doesn't think he should be elected president because she disagrees with him on the economy and on the war. But, you know, he gave about everything he could give to this country without being killed for it. So we owe him our respect. And, her vision of America is very different from the America you're living in. Yeah. She believes this country works best when it's sort of like we are tonight. Here we are, across all the lines that divide us. Race, age, gender, religion. We got people old, young, and in between, and some of us who wish we were still in between. This country works best when it's a country of shared prosperity based on shared opportunities and shared responsibilities, and we're a long way from that today. So the question is, how can we get back to that? How can we rebuild the middle class and give poor people the chance to work their way into it again? How can we reclaim the future for the young people of this country? How can we honorably end this war in Iraq if we be irresistible? But then I gave a serious answer. For this time in our history, I agree with my daughter. I would be here if we had never been married. I think she's the best candidate for president in this election or any election in a very, very long time. And I want to tell you why. First of all, let's look at the condition of the economy. 90% of the benefits of this decade have gone to the top 10% of earners. Over 40% to the top 1%. A big chunk of that to the top 1/10 of 1%. While the cost of health care has doubled, the cost of college education has gone up 75%. Energy costs up $2,000 a family. This year alone, gasoline costs will go up $450 a family, and food between $250 and $300 a family, more if you have to feed more. Meanwhile, if you look at how America is doing now, as compared with the 90s, and I say this not to talk about my record or to ask you to go back, but so we make better decisions in the future. At the 28 million Americans that earn a check,
every 2 weeks but don't have a bank account into the banking system. I'm trying to deal with this epidemic rise of diabetes among young people. I'm trying to help people all around the world, including in America, fight global warming by creating jobs, not losing them. So I know this can be done, and I'm telling you, you look at every other high-income country in the world that is doing well, the only ones that are increasing jobs and reducing inequality, in other words, getting the reverse of what we're getting, are those that have made a serious commitment to more energy independence through homegrown clean energy and energy efficiency. That's where the jobs are. That's where the low-hanging fruit is. We can put America back to work in every rural area, every small town, every suburb, every city, in the entire United States. She also proposes to create 3 million jobs through investing in America's basic infrastructure again. We haven't done any work in a long time to seriously repair our bridges, our roads, our water systems, our sewer systems, our rail network. None of these jobs, by the way, can be outsourced. They all got to be done where the stuff is. And this is important for America. We need a basic job that will bring back manufacturing and enable us to grow together. Every year of this decade, but in the 90s, we gained manufacturing jobs in 6 of the 8 years I had the honor of serving. We can bring them back. She proposed to reestablish the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which will give money to every state in the country, including Oregon, to help to finance the new technologies that will create the jobs that are available here. It's different in every state. You've got to have a partnership. There's no one-size-fits-all plan that the federal government can impose on you. And I know you like that because you're a state known for innovation. Let me just give you an example. I'll just give you some examples. This is one reason Hillary won Ohio, where she was outspent 2-to-1 on television. Won Texas, where she was outspent by $4 million on television. Won Pennsylvania, where she was outspent by $8 million on television, because she said, if you vote for me, I will enable you to have control of your energy future. And I'll just give you some examples. Ohio makes more solar panels in one plant than any place in America. They're opening a second plant. Guess where? Not America, not China, not Mexico. They're opening it in Germany. Why? 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 Because their government gives their people the power through tax incentives to invest in tomorrow's energy that they control instead of yesterday's interest groups. She wants to repeal the subsidies and the tax breaks given to the oil companies, the nuclear industry, and let you invest in the future that's for you. Same thing happens in Texas. You may think of Texas as an oil state. They generate more electricity from the wind than any other state. But they don't generate nearly as much as they could because most of the wind is blowing in places where there are no transmission lines. Suppose you wanted to, if there are transmission hookups that will feed that into the electrical grid. Under her plan, every state would have an allocation to put modern, efficient transmission lines where the sources of energy are. In New Hampshire, she carried all these places that used to be timber towns, and there are a lot of them around here that had closed mills because they realized they could use wood chips and they could close if only they had the transmission lines. That's the sort of thing you want a president to do, to figure out how to put America to work and how to liberate America from dependence on foreign energy sources and save the planet for the young people of this country in the process. Now, she strongly disagrees with the Bush administration in saying that Oregon and the other states up here that want to set a target of 25% of your electricity coming from renewable sources, she thinks you should be able to do it. But Senate was conservative and believed in local government, and every time you turn around, they're trying to take some other power away from you. The third thing I want to say about that is she is very strongly opposed to the law that passed, and let me tell you, you got 3 choices for president. Hillary is the only person that voted against that 2005 energy bill that stripped from you the right to set your own approval of liquefied natural gas sites and transmission facilities. If you want them, you ought to have them, but it ought to be your decision, not somebody else's. These three proposed sites in Oregon would have you carrying into this state 2.5 times as much liquefied natural gas as is used by Oregon and Washington combined. If you want that, you ought to have the right to have it. Under this federal bill, you can't consider the impact on property rights, you can't consider the impact on your environment, you can't consider whether there are alternative sites. You have no say. And she feels very strongly about this, and I can tell you, we lived through this when we were living in Arkansas 20 years ago, when the federal government stripped from us the right to approve power plants that our people had to pay for if they were just built in another state. It was a nightmare. And this is wrong. Senator Wyden's got a bill to reverse it. Hillary strongly supported it from the get-go, but if you'd had her vote controlling thing, you wouldn't be living this in the first place. It's another reason you ought to support her for president. Hillary believes we should repeal that provision of the tax code and substitute for it a tax credit for putting manufacturing jobs back in communities that have lost jobs. We can bring these jobs back to America. They will be competitive if we do the right research and we have the right technology. Now let's talk about health care. Some people know this, but there was a huge debate in the administration. And some of the people who had a, one-size-fits-all mentality said, oh my goodness, Oregon's going to ration health care. The strongest advocate for you in '93 was Hillary. She said, give me a break. We're all rationing health care every single day. If Oregon's got a better idea, why don't we let them try it? And we approved that. And I think you wound up better off than you would have if the federal government had tried to run your health care policy. That's another reason you should support it. Unless you do something about health care costs. But since this is one of the central issues dividing the two candidates, I have to ask this question. Raise your hand if you know somebody without any health insurance. Look around the tree. Just look around. Okay. Now, I ask this question everywhere in America. And, if I'm in a wealthier neighborhood, like I was in the Philadelphia suburbs recently, I'll have fewer people raise their hand. But even in upscale neighborhoods, you have an astonishing number of people raise their hand. Here's what I want to say about this. Number one, there is no other wealthy country on the face of the earth where you get this response. Nobody else would even ask the question. And number two, we can't solve your cost problem unless we solve the coverage problem of the people on whose behalf you raise your hand. You have to decide if you believe this and if it's important to you. Because if you do, you've got to vote for Hillary because she's the only person with a plan that covers absolutely everybody. And I want to talk about it. Think about every time you write a check, you are contributing to the $50 billion the insurance companies spend every single year figuring out how not to insure people. Yeah. Think of it as your non-insurance premium. We're laughing, but think about it. I'm sorry, I'd like to give you a policy, but you have a pre-existing condition. Although if you can pay 5 times the normal rate, I might give you one. I'm sorry, you have a policy, it just doesn't cover what you need right now. I'm sorry, you have a policy, it does cover what you need, but I went back and reviewed your applications and you left the third line blank and I'm revoking it. Yeah. $50 billion a year. If everybody were covered, you'd save $50 billion right off the bat. If you like what you got, you can keep it. If you don't like it, or you can't afford it, or you don't have it, you can buy into the same plan that insures federal employees and members of Congress and their families. It is not a one-size-fits-all plan. That is, if you have little children and you want dental health coverage, you can get it. If you've got mental health issues, there's very good mental health coverage. But the point is, no matter how many variations there are, you can still put them in one computer program, and once you've got millions of people insured, the cost will go down. McKinsey and Company said last year that Americans pay $200 billion a year more for pure paperwork in healthcare than we would pay if we had any other country's health system. So you can save a lot of that, plus the $50 billion, and then under Hillary's plan, you would give that in subsidies to low-income workers, to small businesses and family farmers, so nobody would pay more than a certain low percentage of their income they voted for, and so should you if you care about this. This is a very big deal for the American economy. The next thing I want to say is just a little something about the military. Hillary passed a bill with bipartisan support on the Armed Services Committee and through the Senate and Congress that guarantees that members of the National Guard from Oregon, once they're deployed, for the rest of their life have access to the same exact health care benefits that regular military personnel do. Second, he passed a bill that requires most young voters won't vote on this, but they will pay the highest price if we fail. I know. There are 200,000 homeless veterans in America today, most of them my age, who are Vietnam veterans who have their generation's burden of what we now call post-traumatic stress disorder. If they had and they program within the second growth forest, which would create some more jobs while we protect the old growth forest. Let me talk a little about the county payments law. If we don't restore this, you're going to lose $300 million. You already have all these problems with these methamphetamine labs coming up and all this. You're going to have policemen laid off and schools hurt. Hillary proposes to restore the payments, increase them appropriately with inflation, and to restart the COPS partnership, which would give funds to local communities to hire law enforcement officers to deal with this really serious problem that is coming back. I mentioned two or three other issues that I think are quite important. First is education. We're here in the school building. I want to talk about that. Universal pre-kindergarten to give all of our kids a chance to start off on an even basis. Second is her belief that we have to make a radical change from No Child Left Behind. Because I think it's important that every citizen understand this. You want all the children that come out of North Bend to learn at international levels, don't you? I mean, here you are on the Pacific Ocean. You know we're in a global economy, don't you? And we know, I hope, that they can learn. That is, and this is not a political statement, this is a scientific fact now. There's very sophisticated brain imaging technology that has allowed massive studies of people across all sectors of our society, and the conclusions are irrefutable. Virtually 100% of all the children in the United States, without regard to first language or family income or race, can learn 100% of what they need to know to do well in a global society. That is a scientific fact. It has now been established. We know there is an achievement gap between most American kids and children from other wealthy countries like Singapore and Germany, etc. Here's the problem with No Child Left Behind. No Child Left Behind proposes to close the gap by requiring this school district to give its kids 5 tests 5 years in a row and says we're going to give you your federal money based on how they do on the test. And then it winks at Oregon and says, now don't you sweat it too much because you get to pick the test for the passing score. You get the worst of all worlds. Here's why. This is, first of all, an unfunded mandate, so 80% of our schools have already cut back on history, on economics, on the arts, and on music, things that contribute to people's overall education. That's already happened. Now, if you wanted to use a test to close the, you pick an easy test with a low score, you'll get your money every year. The students will hate it, the teachers will hate it, the parents will hate it, the principals will hate it. Spend all your time teaching the test, and over time, the young people here will learn less than they would have if you had never done it in the first place. That's why people don't like it, and it has to be scrapped. We have to do better. So, what's Hillary's alternative? Her alternative is to use some of this money we're now spending on this to recognize a fact. 2 million American teachers are about to retire simply from the aging process. I want to talk about this a little bit, and I want the young people to listen. There are few iron laws in American economics. Here's one. If you get a high school diploma and 2 years of education after high school, in this economy, your chances of getting a job with a rising income are better than 50-50. If you don't, your chances are less than 50-50. Are there exceptions? Sure there are. If you got a 4-foot vertical jump, you can play pro basketball. And you might have a graduate degree and have your job outsourced. So there are exceptions both ways, but the fact is that the rule holds. So what Hillary strongly supports is first making apprenticeship and training programs and college available to everybody. Raise the Pell Grants every year to keep up with inflation. Number 2, increase the tax credit, the tuition tax credit from its current level of $1,650 to $3,500 a year. Number 3, crack down on the abuses of private student loan companies that are charging these kids 14, 16, 18%, and give them an alternative lower interest to fix the borrow. Let me just say to all of you, the taxpayers saved $4 billion because defaults were lower. Keep in mind, you're on the hook for these high interest loans because you guarantee them. I can borrow money from my government for 2%. You know, I mean, I came from families like most of yours. I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. My state was the second poorest state in America. You know what that says to a kid like me? That my government trusted me enough and believed in my future enough to give me money at 2%? And the other thing, she believes that you should be able to pay this back in more than one way. If you decide to become a public servant so you'll never get rich, if you're a teacher, a nurse, a police officer, a fireman, your service should repay your loan. Every year you serve, you might pay that loan. Now, you don't have to, this is one thing, you don't have to take my do it. I'll never pay it back. Oh yes, you can now. This is nuts. A college diploma is worth over $1 million to a young person in a lifetime, and therefore worth over $1 million to us. Nobody should drop out because they're worried about short-term debt. Now, because of her Student Borrowers Bill of Rights, nobody will ever have to do that again. It's another reason you should support it. Some interesting changes in the trade laws. But the reason you should support Hillary on this is she's told the whole truth. The fundamental problem with trade is that no matter what the rules are, we don't enforce them. Trade enforcement is 1/5 what it was when I was president. 1/5. And the reason is the budget, the deficit. Keep in mind, I left you with 3 surpluses in a row. We paid down $500 billion on the debt. This country would have been, if we had stayed with that budget, we'd stay with that budget instead of giving tax cuts to people in my income group, which I was bitterly opposed to when we had soldiers in the field, a lot of them kids that I had known since they were infants. If we'd done that, this country would be out of debt in 5 or 6 years. There would not have been one question in any of these presidential debates, not one, about what are you going to do about Social Security, what are you going to do about Medicare. We would have. Her position is we are not doing the Rock any favors by taking Senator McCain's position. We're prepared to stay indefinitely. The only way they'll ever make these hard decisions is if they see that we have to bring our troops home in a timely fashion. Finally, you're entitled to know that she does strongly support our mission in Afghanistan because the UN supports it, NATO is there. And every year about this time, the Al-Qaeda and their Taliban supporters try to make another run at that moderate Muslim democracy. Now, the Commandant of the Marine Corps said about 3 weeks ago, we need 3,500 more Marines in Afghanistan. I'm going to send them, but they can't stay very long unless you let me bring the Marines home from Iraq. These people have done everything they were asked to do and more. It is time to bring them home. And she will do a good job again. The reason I think you should give her to do that is because she knows more about it than anybody else. But we need somebody who we can trust to do it in the right way, who will have the confidence of the military. In these states in February, when she lost a bunch of those states when she was out of money, she was always carrying the veterans vote because they knew she was on their side and they trusted her to be commander-in-chief, and I hope Oregon will too. She's doing her job. This is the highly know what she's doing and be able to get the show on the road. We can turn the speakers into a solution, the promise of the problem, the inspiration of the campaign, and the empowerment of the people. And to forget the human impact of everything. If you do that, you'll get in trouble and hurt. Look at the damage done to President Bush's second term by how we all felt about Katrina. New Orleans is a long way from here, but it made you sick, didn't it? Think about your fellow citizens stuck in the Superdome, no water for 5 days, and all that stuff. Why? Because they forgot about you. There were plenty, this is not a partisan deal, there were plenty of Republicans who loved him, who would have done a fine job running the Emergency Management Agency, but they weren't part of the in crowd in Washington, so a guy that ran a horse show association in Florida got the job. And the people down there paid the price. You won't have to worry about that with her. But it's easy to forget, in good times too. If you're not careful, you are as the most fortunate public servant on the face of the earth. You think of this room, think about what the president's like. First of all, every time you walk in the room, they play Hail to the Chief. That's a real rush. Play a song for me every day for 8 years. Every time I walk in farmers, for sustainable farmers, for sell the food close to the market. There are all these people that like her because of health care. She led the way on breast cancer and prostate cancer when she was in the White House, and now she's the head of the autism caucus in the Senate because we have this alarming number of children rampaging with autism. And nobody knows why. One reason we have to get back to stem cell research and human genome research and do the stuff that will find these answers for that, for Alzheimer's and other things. They know it because they have to work with her. And I could just go on and on. The other night I did the 6th of 7 stops in North Carolina. I was in a little town called Hickory, and I did what I'm just about to do. I got in off stage and started shaking hands. Everybody wanted to shake hands. I get over here to the end, and the last person I see is a woman who grabs me with the arms like this, starts shaking and saying, "Look at my daughter, look at my daughter." I was scared to look down. And there was this perfectly normal looking teenage girl. She said, "This is why I support him." I said, "Tell me about it." She said, "Look, I know when you were president that she was the leader on these family issues like the Children's Health Insurance Program." And she said, "What I care most about is adoption." I mean, this lady had it down. She said, $5,000 tax credit to adopt a child with a disability, adopt a child from overseas, they become a citizen the minute they hit the ground. The thing I care most about is she worked with members of both parties to double the number of adoptions of children out of foster care. She said, "This is my daughter." She said, "She saved my daughter from life in the foster care system, and she saved me from life without my daughter. I'm for helping." I say this because most people won't talk to you about this, but in the end, what matters is whether people's lives are changed. She's the best change maker I have ever known, and she has been since the first day I met her when we were in law school, and she took an extra year to try to figure out how to protect children from severe child abuse and neglect. We got out of law school, she went to work for the Children's Defense Fund and tried to figure out how to get children with disabilities really good education in the public schools, and the work she did led to the passage of the special education law with all of her other young friends to guarantee the need and appropriate public education for all of our kids. So I will say again, Robert Kennedy Jr. was right. America needs a president who's on your side, who's got a plan, a vision, and the ability to make changes. You will never have a chance to vote for anybody that's better than that. And if you look at why she won in Pennsylvania being outspent by $8 million on television, and why she won in Ohio being outspent 2-1, and why she won in Texas being outspent by $4 million, people like you elected. in places like this. Without fail, you did it. So if you decide that you want that kind of president, and you show up in strong voice, in intense numbers, and Oregon goes for Hillary, she'll be the nominee, and she'll be elected the next president. Because in every state that matters, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in Arkansas, West Virginia, Kentucky, Missouri, all these states she's even in head. If she wins these states, we are home, and America will have a brighter tomorrow. Thank you. God bless you.